Society webcast. We are focused on the blue economy this year. Today we're talking about data, and there's nothing that's more important than that. Greetings, I'm Millicent Pitts. I'm the Executive Director of Ocean Exchange. Next slide. We're a nonprofit. We exist for one mission, and that's to help advance the adoption of innovative solutions for healthy oceans, sustainable coastal systems, and zero emissions and the decarbonization of ocean shipping and goods movement. You saw some of our key sponsors on that previous slide. You can go to oceanexchange.org to see the whole list of them, and we could not do this, what we do, without them. We are in the middle of our call for solutions. We have two $100,000 non-dilutive grants. By non-dilutive, I mean free money for you non-MBA students, and everyone likes free money. The Neptune and the Orcel Awards are open until August 23rd. We can't even keep our marketing material up to date. We now have 3 collegiate awards, 2 at $10,000 and 1 at $25,000. And we'll be announcing the third new one this week, which is from the Guy Harvey Ocean Foundation. We're really proud to bring them on with us. The collegiate award deadline is in September. Go to oceanexchange.org to see all the details. Now I'm going to turn it over to my partner here. We're so happy to be collaborating with the Marine Technology Society. Take it away, Zdenka.
Great, Millie, and once again, great to be with you. I'm actually joining you all from Rutgers University, where the Marine Technology Society is hosting 2 summer camps. This week it's on HF radar, and next week on gliders. So very briefly, MTS is a professional society that has 2,000 individual, corporate, and institutional members across 20 countries. Established in 1963 on the premise that it's important to foster advances in marine science and technology that benefits humankind and contributes to the sustainability of the planet. I always talk about MTS in the 3 C's. So first, we connect to our members through professional committees and sections. Our sections are geographic, we have an early career ocean professionals, and we have student sections. We're excited that our events have returned with an in-person component. So we hope everyone will join us for the Offshore Technology Conference in Houston in August, Oceans in Action, 30 August to September in Mississippi, Oceans 2021 San Diego Porto in September. Both OTC and Oceans have a hybrid component, and it's important as we slowly recover from the pandemic, but it's also a pillar for equity and justice as the Marine Technology Society looks to reach a far more diverse audience and to be more inclusive. We're a catalyst. MTS, along with SUT, launched the Chartered Marine Technologist Certification Program. Please see the website and on information on how to apply. We have mentoring programs, and we're a supporting organization for the United Decade on Oceans. Communications is so important. We must communicate the importance of the marine technology. We do that through journals and through our monthly newsletters. We joined, as I said, in support of the Ocean Decade, and the June journal is open to all, and it's got fabulous stories on these ocean shots. So please check that out. So I'm particularly excited on all of these webinars, but Marine Technology Society and the Ocean Exchange is really thrilled to get a preview look on this second Ocean Enterprise study. And this is talking about how to understand what that enterprise looks like, and from so far on a new concept of ocean information as that new commodity. So Dane, once again, over to you for another outstanding webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Zenka. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here. We've got some great information today, and I want to give some context. In 1502, an Italian spy named Alberto Contino acquired a map for quite a lot of money in Lisbon and took it to Italy. The map was quite large. There's no information on who created it. It may have been a number of cartographers, and it clearly was created well before 1502, maybe as early as 1499, 1500. couple of things unique about it. It's the first known example of a latitude chart. So every location from South America through Africa into Asia is shown on the map at the correct or near correct latitude. The other thing that's interesting on it is that it appears to show the coastline of Florida, to which, to our knowledge, no European had visited at that point. Quite a find, quite an amazing thing. What is even more interesting, though, is that along with the coastlines that were shown, is in the centers these vast white spaces of which nothing is known. We've been looking at these white spaces for years, and that fired up the imagination of explorers and led to the age of exploration. People really wanted to find out what is out there. But there's one vast white space that remains, and that is the oceans of the world, which is 70% of the surface of the Earth. We've been exploring that surface since the dawn of humans, but we're just beginning. We know more about outer space than we know about the ocean. We know more about quantum physics than we know about the ocean. And we can't go on that way, because one thing we do know is that the ocean is deeply affected by climate, and that the ocean also deeply affects our climate. So when things change in the ocean, fires rage on the West Coast, and there's a direct link between that. So if you think about the next frontier in our search for knowledge, it's the oceans. We need to learn and understand what's going on out there. That's why we're so excited to have our two guests today. Over the years at Ocean Exchange, we've had a lot of people who had great solutions for collecting the data. Any of you who were on July webinar or webcast saw SmartFin, where they're getting fins onto surfboards for surfers who travel around the world and can report back from these fins all the data they collect on temperature, salinity, all the water data and information. But that's a microscopic amount of data compared to what's going on in the entire world and the vastness of the oceans. So today we've got Carl Goldman from NOAA, the Integrated Ocean Observing System Director, and Kelly Keller from SOFAR Ocean Technologies, who's collecting this and is doing some great work out there. So what I want to do is a couple of things. As you're listening, please put your questions in the questions area if it's working, not the chat. Last time the questions weren't working, so if it's not working, put it in chat. Otherwise, we'll get going and get happening. Carl, let me hand off to you. Great, welcome to the Ocean Exchange Marine Technology webcast.
Thank you, Dane, and thank you, Millie and Stenka, the Ocean Exchange and the Marine Technology Society. Go ahead, next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the new blue economy and then the ocean observing value chain. Next slide. The images you have here are a brand new book, shameless plug by me. This book is preparing a workforce for the new blue economy, and the co-editors are Liesl Hodeling and Richard Spinrad. Dr. Spinrad has just become the head of NOAA, and I'm a chapter author within that book as well. And it's really all about how do we prepare for the information age that's going to be exploding over the next decades with regard to ocean information. So from what Dane just said, the situation is folks like Kelly are helping gather more information and understanding about the ocean every day. And how do we prepare to use that information to best effect for sustainable growth in the blue economy? The image on the other side, the ocean economy in 2030, is a report that came out, I believe it was 2016, by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's a global organization across the most developed countries in the world. And they estimated that the ocean economy would triple by 2030 to be a $3 trillion economy. And their report outlines the sustainability is a piece of that as well. We cannot just use the ocean. We need to actually use it in a wise way that's sustainable and make sure that we're maintaining ecosystem services and the value of the recreational and tourism benefits and things like that as well. And it's in that context that I'm going to move forward to the next slide. And I'm smiling because Stenka mentioned the Ocean Enterprise Study, and I'm going to describe to you a little bit about the ocean observing value chain and then how we're trying to understand and study it a little bit. And the study that I'm going to give you some sort of preview results is about to come out in another month or so. But Stenka was the lead for the first study when I worked for her about 6 years ago, and so that's why I'm smiling. So she was a big part of making that happen, and I was a part of it the first time, and then now I get to talk about it while she's president of MTS. So the ocean value chain, we look at the observations and measurement bubble, and then we take that and synthesize the data and sometimes model things and predict them. Intermediaries often take those data and then add value by putting different data sets together to make decision support tools or information services. And those information services are provided to others and sometimes for sale. And the end users that are buying those services or just getting those services from intermediaries, if they're government public good, are finding benefit by making decisions. The Ocean Enterprise Study that I've mentioned, we tried to understand within ocean observing and mapping and measuring and forecasting, what are the companies within the US doing that kind of work? And we lump them into providers, intermediaries, and end users. Providers are companies that go out and gather data, build kit to go and do that, so technologies to gather data, service those capabilities in the ocean, deploy them and get them back. Intermediaries are anyone that does something with that data to add value and further it to another market. And so Kelly's going to talk to you later, and I think they're in both buckets of provider and intermediaries. And then the real value comes at the end user point, and that's much harder to measure because you have to get to individual decisions made by individuals and then how that ripples out into the economy. So this study really looked at just the provider and intermediary companies in the US, and we're doing some other projects to try to tease out the specific end user benefits. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're about to release a new study that's based on 2020 survey data. The first study was done based on 2015 survey data. So we're going to have a 5-year trend analysis possible now. And the dollar signs are in the bubble diagram there showing you that we looked at the observation and measurements and the intermediaries specialty areas. And trying to understand the scale and scope of these businesses helps us to understand how the private sector is using information and how they're interacting with government programs, and then how we can dialogue and figure out ways to partner to find win-win solutions that are helping to advance the economy while also advancing our capabilities to observe and monitor the oceans. Next slide. So sneak preview of the results that are going to come out in this report. In 2015, we had companies 410 identified in this space, 36 states, 245,000 employees, and $7 billion in revenues with about $1 billion in exports. So on the right, you see we've more than doubled the number of companies. We've increased the number of states, increased the employment numbers, and the revenue numbers are at 8 billion. And exports approximately 2 billion. So during a period where we had the pandemic and significant changes in industry structure out there in terms of markets, we're still impressed to see that there's growth in the number of companies and in the revenues as well. So let's go to next slide. So to give you a little example of the sectors and where those markets are shifting, I highlighted here for you the 2015 column versus the 2020 column. So for instance, in coastal protection, 44% of the companies are involved in that market space now rather than 34. So I've highlighted the ones that showed the most sort of interesting growth from my perspective. And over on the right, in terms of the products for being a provider, what kind of provider company work are you looking at? Platforms, towed systems, AUVs has grown a lot. So that's sort of the explosion in the autonomous technologies. And then down on the lower left, water and water quality has become a much higher percentage. And then renewable energy, specifically the offshore wind energy, has grown a lot. And during the same period, you see the oil and gas has reduced a little bit on this chart, and that's one of the biggest shifts in terms of the regime within our ocean industries. And it's those big big sectors like oil and gas and shipping, where you get the technology advances often that we're going to then use for our environmental monitoring and modeling as well. And I think with that, I'm going to stop and hand it back over to you, Dane and Kelly.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, it's really fascinating how fast the blue economy is growing, and it's also what I think. As much as we think about data and the internet and technology and being technically mature, digitally mature companies, I think most people don't have a clue how big that is. The amount of data that's out there, the ways that we can use it is bigger than most people can possibly get to. So Kelly was with SoFar Ocean Technologies, has a background in business development, and really is working hard on this. And she and I were talking before, Kelly, I was saying that while we've had all sorts of data gathering contestants in the Ocean Exchange, this by far is the biggest one in terms of what to do with the data once you gather it, which is pretty cool. So tell us about the work you're doing.
Thanks so much, Dane. I appreciate the introduction. And Carl, that study is phenomenal. The changes in those three categories over the past 5 years are extremely significant. I'll address that in a minute. I also want to say thank you to the Ocean Exchange and the Maritime Technology Society for having SoFar Ocean represented in this group of big thinkers and people with great ideas who want to do big things now rather than wait a lifetime. SoFar Ocean is this fantastic company. We're a Series A startup in San Francisco, and with a headcount just under 50, our vision is to connect the world's oceans to provide insights to science, society, and industry for a more sustainable planet. We want to be the change. We want to help connect people. And as a first step, we deploy the world's largest real-time ocean weather sensor network, and the real-time aspect of that is key. A lot of these buoys that you were discussing, Dane, the mapping in the past, and Carl deals with this on a daily basis. It's one thing to collect the information, and it takes time to get the information back. If we can shorten that time spans, we can make decisions faster. In parallel, in the defense market, you look at full motion video coming off drones and the kind of instantaneous decisions that can be made to save lives. If we translate that into studying the ocean and really evolve from the challenge being get the data, now the challenge can be what can we do? How can we innovate once we have this data? And that's critically important. Next slide, please. So we talk about the challenge of collecting the data, but really the impacts of not having that data are significant. We talk about right now, our current administration is keenly focused on climate change and those impacts and things we can lessen the burden and do things differently to reduce some of our emissions. We talked about safety at sea. We're seeing stronger storms, stronger hurricanes, and that impact on coastal erosion as well. Hurricanes over the past several years have, the impact has been in excess of $20 billion, and that's really significant. So when we look to recover from storms and whatnot, just-in-time shipping, getting the right materials to the right people at the right time, that's an important thing we're focused on doing. Next slide, please. Our founding CEO, Tim Jansen, had the privilege of working with Dr. Monk, and Dane, you alluded to this with your opening comment, like undersampling. So how can we close that gap? How can we understand more about the ocean faster and start doing more innovative things real time? Next slide, please. So this picture here speaks volumes, especially right now during the COVID pandemic. This is a picture from December on the right hand, and it's a cargo ship, and it lost over 1,900 containers. I mean, that's just one ship. 90% of our global market moves via the shipping industry, moves across the ocean. The data points for weather forecasting are sparse right now, but SoFar Ocean had this big vision to just network the ocean with sensors, low-cost sensors, so that we can provide better weather forecasts. In particular, why that's significant, it reduces the ship's likelihood of getting into higher sea states. They can burn their fuel more efficiently, thereby reducing their emissions. That's significant. And when you stay out of the higher sea states and avoid rogue waves or, you know, bad weather situations, we can prevent losing cargo specifically, and how that influences everything in the supply chain right now. We have ports that are modernizing as well with just-in-time shipping, and how that is impacted with the people who work the port and the logistics of getting that to the railhead or trucks to, you know, middle America, so that everyone's market has goods to sell and just for daily life right now. So anything we can do to shorten that time spans, understand the nature and the environment of how the shipping industry is impacted by weather, and at the same time provide more research data points. That's something so far is really passionate about. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you a little bit about you know, why this is so hard. And you know, the ocean is massive. We boil things down to a paper map that we can see in an 8x11 frame, but really that distance is so expansive. Next slide, please. So how do you cover that great distance? So far, oceans come up with a spotter buoy. It's about the size of a basketball, easily deployable, and it collects those 7 parameters such as surface wave spectrum, wind speed and direction, surface currents and direction, sea surface temperature, barometric pressure, and acoustic intensity. All critically important, all tied to what Carl's group at IOS is studying right now. And it's significant because it is low cost. It's easy to get into the ocean. We can airdrop our spotters. We often use vessels of opportunity to drop them in the ocean. Next slide, please. I have a picture of this. We started out back in about March when I joined the company with about 500 spotters in the ocean. Within the next 6 months, we look to have over 2,000 in the ocean, and that also includes all of our moored buoys off of the coastlines. So about 2,000 sensors in total, 2,000 data points that we didn't have before, 2,000 instances of measurements every hour. Providing rich ocean information for predictive forecasts. And next slide, please. This is just a great example, and thank you, Alice, for making this work for me. In 3 months' time, we've been able to cover the Northern Atlantic just using vessels of opportunity. So where there was those big white gaps on the maps you mentioned, Dane, we are providing real-time information. On the image on the left, you see the dark circle with the tail. That's the track over the amount of time the drift the buoys had in the Pacific area. So not only do we know where the buoys are, we're covering the ocean. Now we're starting to collect how the currents are moving these buoys over what time scale, what weather conditions, and correlating that with that vast data strategy that NOAA has with satellite imagery and other sources of weather information. Like, this is really powerful. This is a leap and bound compared to how we were doing business, understanding the oceans 20 years ago. Next slide, please. 2 key things here with SOFAR Ocean and our company in particular. One, we're reducing these RMS errors by 20 to 50%. We just have more measurements, better weather forecasts. We're updating every 4 to 6 hours with some of our shipping customers in general. On top of that, we're applying artificial intelligence and deep learning, machine learning, to really evolve and predict how the weather is going to evolve over time, which is having significant impact to our customers. Next slide, please. So this picture really speaks to me when we talk about the assimilation differences between what NOAA's been trying to do on their budget with their resources and what we've done in the short 2.5 years as a company. Our sensors, as those polygons in the picture on top get larger, that's the magnitude of change between the NOAA measurement and our measurement in the same part of the ocean. And this is phenomenal because the partnership that SOFAR has with NOAA and other organizations globally, this helps scientists perform better research. It helps us understand our models better. It helps us evolve the models and do new and interesting things with the data. So much has been focused on land masses and in space, and instead of what's really going on in the ocean. So now that we have a better picture of where our differences are between our organizations, now we can work together to close those gaps and collect new types of information to understand the oceans in a more impactful way, a way to do things differently. Next slide, please. So our business model so far, Ocean, is ocean data as a service. When you look at acquisition in general, it takes a long time to staff a program and buy goods and mobilize goods or products and get the information. We can do this real time right now. That's why so far is significant in this space. And we have some great peer companies also in the maritime space that are doing big things, trying to collect specific types of ocean data, whether that be acoustics or measuring the ionosphere for space weather. But in our space, with our small profile, we can immediately provide that impact. We get it, real time via a communications link in Iridium, and then we can push that to our user community, whether that's the models used by NOAA, by DARPA, by the Navy, just to help evolve the information. Next slide, please. I want to talk about Wayfinder the next 2 minutes here. This is one application we've built on top of the data. Next slide. So the shipping industry is really interesting in so much that, there's 3 types of charters. Bulk, like we're moving iron ore from continent to continent. Fuels and oils, second and third is those container ships I showed you previously. So how can we get those goods from point A to point B most expeditiously in the calmest sea state possible, which allows the most efficient use of those ships' engines? Right now, especially as evidenced by the COVID pandemic, now more than ever, that the speed to get those goods from A to B, ship captains are under tremendous pressure to take risks to get that cargo to ports, but it's catastrophic when we lose that cargo. Next slide, please. So the SOFAR team has developed this Wayfinder application, and what this does, it's route optimization based on those real-time weather measurements, so that we can provide the ship captain and that charter an optimized route, and that route keeps them in a profile that addresses their engine, and that it's burning fossil fuels at present, and it's really expensive for a ship captain to go to dry dock and do maintenance. So we have thousands of ships on the ocean every single day. So how do you no ship captain right now wants to take a time out and fix their ship. I mean, there's a lot of money in the global market moving goods since COVID has happened. Secondly, just their emissions in general, you keep the emissions low. And what is realized at the end of this, it's reduced consumption of fossil fuels, it's reduced emissions, and it's dollars saved by not spending those resources. It's something very powerful that we can do right now. Next slide, please. And here's an example of this optimization and the opportunity gain. 18% gained $44,000 for this particular ship route, this one instance of moving from point A to B, continent to continent, and multiply that by the number of ships that are moving right now. That cost savings is significant. More importantly, the carbon reduction, the emissions reduced, that's extremely powerful. So far is in this amazing position where not only are we building that rich real-time data set of weather information, but we're also doing something bold. We're showing right now, it takes a long time to invest in synthetic fuels, and that would be very expensive for ships to convert to those fuels. It takes a long time to do some of the other things that the administration is asking the shipping industry to do to reduce emissions. But right now, just take a better route, take a more efficient route. It shows immediate impact in addressing the problem. At the same time, we're collecting that critical ocean information so we can understand what's really going on in the ocean and those small deltas between each. You know, the erosion study, the environmental study, Carl, that you mentioned earlier, and that 10% change in coastal protection. You know, we look at what we can do in the shipping industry, but at the same time, we're doing significant things on the coast as well. We're working with USGS, with NOAA, with Army Corps of Engineers to really study our infrastructure and how we can better react in advance of these storms as well. So I didn't want to lose sight of that aspect. The coastal monitoring is still critically important, something we definitely partner with on a daily basis. But that expanse of the ocean that isn't covered, that is our big focus. That is where we're moving the needle and having impact. And we're just so excited to be part of this great team in the blue economy and helping Carl and organizations like Carl's do something different.
That's great. Thank you, Kelly. Let me just remind people, we've got some questions in the question section, and put your questions there if you want. Kelly, one thing, you know, your story about Wayfinder really struck me, because the Port of Los Angeles right now is deploying software to help the carriers plan their routing so that they can arrive just when the dockside space is going to open, so they're not having to anchor offshore for a day. That helps them minimize their fuel costs and minimize the pollution for it. So it's a really great example, the Wayfinder, of how we can really cut these fuel costs down and cut the emissions. We did have one question about alternative fuels. I'm going to pass on that because we're really focused on data here today. Carl, there was a question from Bill Arnold, who wanted to know about, well, the ocean's important, there's a lot of fresh water, and aren't they connected? As I remember from your work, you guys include the Great Lakes, but talk about the freshwater edition.
Sure. Yeah, I meant to cover a little bit the mission of the program, the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System. We're supposed to cover the head of tide to the EEZ in the United States and connect to the global system of ocean observing. And we're supposed to do that to support 7 societal goals. Well, that's everything you can imagine, from health and safety and food and water quality and you know, predicting hazards and harmful algal blooms and all of that. And so there is a lot of focus on coastal ocean modeling, and then we're doing a lot of work with the National Water Center and the National Water Model within NOAA to do the coastal coupling of the ocean and coastal models with the water models. And even more importantly, from there, we are also working on coupling the atmospheric modeling with the ocean modeling. And there's a lot of different reasons for the models to be developed, and they get in place, and then the structures that are there are functioning, but there's a lot of complexity there as well. So we're doing a fair amount of work to make more modeling code openly available and open source and modular, so that the extramural and academic experts can look at it in a common framework and make experimental adjustments to improve it, and we can evaluate it in an apples to apples comparison sort of way. And we need to do that not just for the modeling, but then we add the data sources like SOFAR buoys and others in to validate the models and determine how far off are the models from what we're actually measuring. And that's the way we move things forward. We do science and to analyze that. We then figure out, okay, this is going to work a little bit better, and you make transitions to the next version of the model and the next version, and you can also determine, all right, I need more sampling in these areas for these reasons. You do temporary sampling, or you figure out, wait, I need a long-term station somewhere to make those measurements that are going to be fed into those forecasts. But a lot of work with the National Water Center and the National Water Model, and they're doing great work in terms of modernizing the way that we're doing the predictions from the rivers to the sea. And so I hope that's responsive to the question.
That's a great response. And let me build on that. You mentioned a $3 trillion ocean economy by 2030. How much of that do you predict would be actually the business of data?
I'm not going to go there, meaning I don't know the details of that report well enough to make a speculative guess on that. Okay. But they may do in that report. That's a good question. So that'd be something that I'd like to look back and try to get back to you on. I think Kelly gave you a good example with that Wayfinder app. She just hit 3 different ways that has benefit, right? Safety, savings in dollars, and CO2 emissions. And so that's the information age possible right now. And that's what you're asking me. And so I don't want to give you a percentage of that 3 trillion, but that's what the new Blue Economy Workforce book I mentioned too talks about, is the information age is here. And the trick is, how are we going to have the people and smarts to take use of the new technical capabilities we have, and do that in a nimble way, in a flexible way. And that's what I worry about programmatically. It's how to be flexible and use what's happening.
We just worked on a project for the Port of Los Angeles, which was designed to get them to 0 emissions in their drayage truck fleet. And I swear we were probably 3/4 of the way through the project when I sat down at my desk one morning and I literally saw, talk about a white space, the great white space in the middle of it was all the data that could be gathered from all those trucks, and then all the ways that data could be used to just streamline the entire process from getting the ships in to getting the containers off to getting them on trucks and trains and out of the place. And the data became literally the pivot point which changed the entire project. Kelly, we've got a question from Adam Bennett. What sort of sensor limitations are there currently for your buoy network? Are there some sensors that you want to add to their buoys but can't because of technological challenges?
Oh, hi, Adam. Thanks for the great question. I'm really excited. We are working on our Spotter version 3 buoy, which makes it extremely more modular and allows for that sensor payload growth. So right now, in our company's infancy, as I mentioned, we're 2.5 years old. We started somewhere in those 7 parameters I talked about. That was the significant gap that we needed to cover first. So, you know, the Spotter buoy is kind of like an iPhone without an app store. So as we continue to evolve that buoy, in parallel, we're also working on an open interface standard for the maritime space called Bristlemouth, sponsored by the government as well. And that open standard should allow that iPhone, if you will, to evolve the App Store so that we have more unique sensors, different types of sensors. And the sensors needed to monitor coral reef degradation or coral reef health in general, as well as the sensors needed to address the acidification of the ocean. Like, so far's vision is this heterogeneous fleet. We need a little bit of everything right now, and we just had to have a starting point in our first few years of the company. But I'm excited. Our engineering team is extremely excited to move forward on that. We have an amazing product team led by Ariel, and you're going to see a lot more evolution of our product line over the next 3 years.
Aliska Praskovich has a comment. She says, and this is probably aimed more at, well, maybe both of you. She says the Coast Guard is doing a Pacific Coast port access route study. Comments open in the Federal Register, and she thinks comments that maybe NOAA and SOFAR could work there in those efforts. Are you working with other government agencies like that, Kelly?
Yes, we absolutely are. It's the Coast Guard's 231st birthday today, so Elise, that question is extremely poignant. I think one of the areas we're also looking at is the Arctic, and with the polar ice melt rapidly occurring basically faster than we predicted, how that's changing operations, specifically search and rescue operations for the U.S. Coast Guard, monitoring those areas, spills and whatnot. So far, Ocean is really excited to be partnering with the Coast Guard and other government agencies in the future, as well as the commercial space, on how we can collect that information and do things differently as that climate changes. Carl, how about your team?
We've got a question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Carl.
Well, to the general question of working with other agencies, that's in my mandate. I'm supposed to work with all of the Ocean Policy Committee agencies within the government. So there's 17 different agencies and we meet, but based on my legislation called the, well, we have legislative mandate. CORA is the acronym, Coastal Ocean Observing and Research Act of 2020. And so we're supposed to work across all those agencies to use the data to the best effect to meet all of our missions, and then maximize the ability to, meet them better. And so with Coast Guard specifically, we're working, we provide surface current monitoring data, and we've optimized that to feed into their search and rescue optimal planning system, so that they get better data to do their projections of where a particle or a person might go if they're lost at sea. And so that's one application. And we work with USGS on coastal modeling and coastal erosion issues. We work in the water coming down the rivers is USGS gauges as well, as you mentioned earlier. And there's a host of other ones. And NSF, the National Science Foundation, has its ocean observatories initiatives. So when I mentioned bringing new science into the equation of where we're going to do more sampling and modeling, having a research agency that's doing the basic research, and then having an agency like NOAA that's more on the applied side, that's a continuum, and we try to coordinate our activities. And sorry about the noises from my office mate here.
That's okay. Hey, you talked about rivers, Carl, and getting data on the rivers. Joseph Solano has a related question. He says, I work primarily with U.S. inland waterways. There appears to be a disconnect providing environmental and climatology support services in the part of transitioning from brown water to blue water. Can you comment on that? What's being done?
All right, little button. Well, we're not sampling everywhere I'd like to sample. So there's certainly places where we're not sampling the level of variables we might want to understand the answers to all the questions we have. We do have the stream gauge network from USGS, and we have coastal stations. So what was the specific question that he asked?
What's being done to transition, to get the information for transitioning from what's happening in the river to the ocean?
Yeah. So the one of my brother or sister offices within NOAA is the Center for Operational Oceanographic Products and Services, and they run our National Water Level Observation Network and coordinate very closely with USGS, who has our Stream River Gauge network. And so they do gap analysis to understand where we have data needs, and they have ongoing lists that are prioritized, and we work with the communities in the different regions of the US to understand those gaps and then re-articulate them every few years, because changing conditions and changing needs. And then having that stuff written down and in a plan that can be read and understood and or picked up when we get the chance for the resources, we put them in those places where we need it.
So Scott Beatty has a question for you, Carl, but I think it really is for both of you. What are the existing challenges in transitioning from procurement of sensors toward procurement of data? Kelly, you want to jump on that first?
Oh, there's lots of challenges in that space, Dane, and Scott, thank you for asking. And Carl mentioned earlier legislation, and there was a way of doing business, I'll say 20 years ago, or we've always done it this way. That is something we run into at SOFAR. I ran into at Liquid Robotics in my previous role, and really it's encouraging our elected officials to think big, think broader about what we can do with data as a service, but it's also having that keen understanding of, as Carl mentioned, of how difficult it is to take new data, different sources, and put it into a model that's been evolving over time. They say many hands make light work, but when it comes to software code, that can be disastrous. So having some kind of we need the early adopters within organizations like NOAA that are willing to do something different. And the former head of NOAA, Tim Gallaudet, he's a great friend of SOFAR Ocean and lots of other blue economy companies. He had that big data vision that he brought to the organization. He looked at unmanned systems and artificial intelligence and how that can evolve NOAA as an organization, and that takes time. As much as I hate to say that, it takes time. It's farming. It's not something I would expect to do, at least within the government space. to happen immediately. There's so many checks and balances on how the government does their business in general. In the commercial side, though, we see early adopters with the Wayfinder app daily. Sheik's under my boss, my mentor, our VP of sales. He's phenomenal, and he's assembled teams, brought on some keen hires, Seb in New Zealand, John in Europe, that really understand the industry, and like they are calling every shipping company almost daily asking, hey, are you willing to take a chance with this? It could transform your business. It could help you make different decisions. So I think it's a little bit of a dance, and it's just acknowledging that for the government to move quickly, there's lots of variables to consider, and we have to be patient and just be a helpful partner, ready to step in and provide the data when Carl says he'll take it. Carl, your thoughts?
Well, Carl, I think we're going to have to wrap it now, but thank you, Kelly and Carl, both of you. It's really a great topic, and there's so much work that's being done. It's very exciting. So Millie, over to you.
Great. Thank you all. I want to thank Dane Dunstan for sure. He's been with Ocean Exchange. He's the MC of our live event, which is October 24th through 26th in Fort Lauderdale. And I'll be talking to a lot of you about that. That's where we bring in our collegiate finalists and our other finalists, and they pitch in front of a highly curated group of investors, business people, NGOs, government leaders. And Dane's done that. Is it 7 or 8 years now, Dane?
Oh gosh, 2014 was the first time, so that's about 8 years now.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
time flies.
yeah.
Anyway,
for those listening, great event. Please come. It's a great 3 days.
Dane, in his time when he's not moderating our stuff, does a lot of good stuff with leadership development and helping, as he says, rewarding leadership lives and building great cultures. He's a wonderful guy. Next slide. There we go. September 8th, we have our next webcast about market disruption. We have a professor from Wharton at University of Pennsylvania, and we have the CEO and founder of Global Oceans. I already mentioned Ocean Exchange, mark that down. You see where you can find more information about us. Thank you all very, very much. Great webcast today, an important topic. And then we want to thank the people behind the scenes. We don't want to forget them. We have Alice and Monica and Christina, and we couldn't do this without them. We curate prior copies, prior webcasts. You can see the links there. You could go to either the MTS Society website or to oceanexchange.org to find the whole libraries. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.